But thank you everyone for joining. Today we are catching up on the conceptual schoolyard redevelopment plan for Benjamin Franklin. On the right there, we're going to do a handful of introductions. As we go through this, there may be questions that come up. If you have any, please feel free to type those into the chat window. Lisa Neeb from Reflow is going to be collecting those questions, and then at these 2 points, we'll kind of revisit those. And then after we have that first break for questions, we'll review what the current draft conceptual plan is. And I do want to underline that it is draft. This will be the second draft that we're reviewing, and it is conceptual, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. And we do appreciate that this is all being done digitally, which is not the easiest format, but we are at, we'll be reviewing 5 different ways for people to provide feedback as well as this session is. So gonna kind of keep tight on things. If you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the agenda or the chat. So to kick things off, we wanted to start talking about where this project came from. The Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District is sponsoring the effort to create these conceptual redevelopment plans, heavily focused in on stormwater green infrastructure. And Jay Fiker is here from MMSD to just explain a little bit more about why MMSD is investing in schoolyard redevelopment projects.
Yeah, so like Justin said, my name is Jay. I do a lot of outreach with the district and manage projects associated with green infrastructure. And what green infrastructure is basically our way of managing water using more natural systems. So MMSD's main function is to protect public health, and our specific slice of that is keeping the water clean. And in different parts of the city, that looks a little different, but essentially where Benjamin Franklin is, I believe, is still in the combined, do you know, Justin? Is it in the combined sewer area?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, so in this area, all the water that hits your property here goes into the storm sewers, which then also goes into the wastewater system. So it all combines into one thing and comes to our treatment plant, which during a heavy rain can overwhelm our system, which can unfortunately lead to overflows. And so we're trying to reduce that, protect the lake, protect people's homes. And if you look at this aerial right here on this slide, you can see clearly, and you guys know it, Benjamin Franklin has a lot of those hard surfaces that don't absorb the water naturally. And so by us helping invest in your school and greening it, it's good for a lot of reasons, by making it more shade for you, more natural play for the children. But there's a benefit to us also, because that helps absorb the water into the ground naturally versus just sending it down to the sewer system, which can, like I said, overwhelm the system. So for us, it's really about how much water can we capture on this property while also still maintaining a good and fun playground for your students. So it's a balance here. But in terms of MMSD funding, that's why we're involved.
Perfect. And so if the primary objective is stormwater management, the costs for the past projects have ranged 80, sometimes 90% of the costs are related to stormwater management. And so that's why there's such a heavy emphasis on that. But on the same token, we can still provide outdoor classroom spaces and recreational improvements, arts improvements, all sorts of other really great things that would be fundraised for outside of MMSD structure. A little bit more about that. With that being said, is Sarah on yet? Did we catch her? Not quite yet. Not yet. Okay, still working on it. That's fine.
I'm here.
Oh, hey, Sarah. Just wanted to provide an opportunity if you wanted to, if there's any elected officials on the line, what we'll do is we'll just kind of provide an opportunity for those, or if you have anyone else that you would like to welcome or just kind of kick things off to.
I know I did invite our school board president as well as our school board member, Shakwana and Larry Miller. I don't know if they are on at this time.
If there are any elected officials, please feel free to unmute yourself and introduce yourself. worries. And like I said, we are recording this session, so this session will be shared with others as well, and we'll keep the feedback forms that we'll talk about in a minute open for the next 2 weeks. So there's should be plenty of opportunity for others who can't join us today to respond as well.
Awesome.
Okay, so with that being said, Reflow is a nonprofit in Milwaukee. I'm the executive director and environmental engineer. Reflow has our Green and Healthy Schools program in the bottom left. We've been working with MMSD and Milwaukee Public Schools and many other partners for several years in greening schools. We also have other programs, innovative placemaking. That's a picture of Fondy Park, which went into construction a couple of years ago, connecting green space with public spaces. Our third program area is Milwaukee Water Stories, where we share digital water stories through different digital media. We also support rainwater harvesting projects. So that picture there is from Alice's Garden, but more locally, we've partnered with Teens Grow Greens in the past to support Fred's Garden, which is across the street from Benjamin Franklin. And then we also have a high school foreman program where we hire high school students to support all of these different programs. And they play an important role in helping to document the schoolyard redevelopment projects, as well as build benches and signs and other activities as well. That's just kind of FYI and what Reflow is. Several years ago, we helped to organize the Green Schools Consortium of Milwaukee, which is this regional network of practitioners, agencies, and funders, all getting together on a routine basis to share lessons learned and resources to support green, healthy schools. So we've got everyone on this call, everyone at Benjamin Franklin, but then I just want to communicate that there's this much larger network in the region as well that's very supportive of your school and the effort that you guys will be going through in the coming years. I do want to say that this would have been the 5th annual Green Schools Conference this year. It's attended by about 300 people. Unfortunately, we had to cancel it this year due to COVID. But we are looking at providing a webinar to support some of the water-focused curricular activities that are locally available to schools as well. These are some visuals to help better understand some of the things that we're talking about. All too familiar is a picture like this. We see a lot of asphalt at urban schools, but they don't have to look like that. There are a number of local schools that have gone through the effort over the past decade to remove asphalt and put in green space. This is a Maryland Avenue Montessori on the east side of Milwaukee, Milwaukee Public School. We are working with them and others through the Green Schools Consortium to document lessons learned and then help to develop a process where multiple schools can go through that same effort each year and have students meaningfully engaged throughout that process as well. This is the schoolyard redevelopment process. So, and these, I'll start at the top. So conceptual planning. So where you guys are right now, Benjamin Franklin, you're in cohort 4. So we've been at this for a number of years. And your cohort includes 4 other schools, and you'll spend all of 2020 in conceptual planning. So it bridges 2 academic years. And then all of 2021 in the fundraising phase. And then construction will take place in 2 summers from now. And there are a lot of lessons learned from the schools that are ahead of you. Was it last summer, 2 summers ago? There are pilot schools that went through, and then the first cohort is what we are celebrating this last year. And each year there are 5 schools that go through this process. Last year, we raised about $2.8 million to support 5 schoolyard redevelopment projects with Milwaukee Public Schools, Grants Department, the Facilities Department, Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District, City of Milwaukee, Fund for Lake Michigan, and CDS as well. So there's a lot of partners that are working behind the scenes to help move these projects forward as well. And here's some visuals of what the whole process can look like. This is a picture in the top left of Longfellow Community School before the project was redeveloped. They did some really great activities to engage their school staff and students. And so around Earth Day, they organize a community build or a community cleanup, which has been really successful. We supported that through a couple different means, but in this case, we also took a school photo outside, which was a fun activity. Community Design Solutions is a graduate program at UW-Milwaukee in the Urban Planning and Architecture department. And their graduate students partner with each of the schools to develop these renderings and conceptual plans along with reflow. So that's kind of a cool activity and very valuable resource as well. And then we do actively engage students and maintenance staff in the process, especially at certain points. In this case, this picture shows one of the hired engineers to support one of the early projects. And we were able to work with MPS to be able to write in opportunities for student employment and engagement throughout the process as well. And then it is important document projects, and that's a good picture of the high school students documenting the projects, but to celebrate the built projects as well. And so a lot of what we're going to be talking about today and what we've been talking about is making sure that the plans that we're using or developing are feasible. And so it is really important that we are talking about making sure that we get across the finish line and these are buildable projects. So just to share a couple of examples, these schools are from cohort 1. This is Starms Early Childhood Center on 27th and North Ave. Previously, they had all this asphalt drained to one low point, and now what the project includes is some porous ground cover, so that allows to soak in that stormwater. Jay used the term stormwater green infrastructure. And the bioswale and the porous pavement and that rubber surfacing helps to soak in stormwater and reduce stormwater runoff, which causes basement backups and flooding. And here's a good opportunity that we were able to connect some arts components and recreation. And so here there are 3 river slides that represent the 3 major river waterways in Milwaukee that flow down to Lake Michigan. So there's some geography lessons that are built into that. There are nodes on different cities around the Great Lakes. So students, Milwaukee or Chicago, as opposed to 1, 2, 3. And then here there are musical features, new trees, all that good stuff. Here's Longfellow on 27th and just south of National. This picture was taken before the synthetic turf field was put in, but that turf field holds about 20,000 gallons of stormwater underneath it as well. This picture also shows where an outdoor classroom is going and a bioswale, and at Longfellow they also had a healthy food access component, and so they were able to raise enough money to be able to pay for a new greenhouse as a part of that schoolyard redevelopment as well. This is Hawley Environmental. They have a strong environmental focus, and so having a native prairie on their school grounds was of interest. Having this outdoor classroom space, new trees, of course, leaving some amount of asphalt to support basketball and other asphalt games. And then all of this stormwater from this site drains down to one low point, which is where the kickball field is. And there's a 20,000 gallon underground cistern below that kickball field. So when the students run the dimensions of that kickball field, they're running the dimensions of that underground infrastructure. And we're working with the school to install some equipment so that they can measure the water that goes into that cistern and be able to connect that to math and science activities. The last school I'm going to show you here is Burdick Elementary, just north of the airport. They had almost a city block of asphalt. We were able to remove about the asphalt and put in new green space, bioswale, outdoor classroom. This project also includes a hill, which may not sound overly impactful, but that is a good example of having some terrain and have some kind of cool features on the school site, which is relevant to what we have in the concept plans for Benjamin Franklin as well. Okay, so the school selection process, and I'm about to ask Sarah and Mr. Turner about where you guys came from for Benjamin Franklin, just to kind of reiterate your need and enthusiasm. But just for everyone else, the way that we selected schools is really important as well. And so we work through the Green Schools Consortium of Milwaukee. Schools submit a 2-page application, and then we ask those schools to come present to about a 50-person committee, which can be kind of intimidating, but the schools have an opportunity to speak on their need and enthusiasm, which is very qualitative criteria, but 5 schools are chosen each year. And I think it would be helpful if you guys could just kind of communicate, Sarah, maybe if you would just share why Benjamin Franklin, what your need and enthusiasm was that you shared at the Green Schools Consortium.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been working on kind of recreating the whole concept of play at Benjamin Franklin. My first year here, the majority of our disciplinary issues came right off the playground. And so we really had to focus on what are we doing out there to engage students. And so we kind of went through a couple of iterations of organized play, and then we got a small grant from Playworks, and they worked with us on kind of developing a playground use and how do we use and manage the adults and engage students in play. We developed zones, and so working toward that, how do we use our playground more efficiently, and the number of incidents from our playground reduced significantly. So now then the next kind of iteration was, how do we make this space more beautiful? How do we use it to engage our students? And knowing that we have such a high population of students with special needs, this big open empty space with a basketball court and this kind of old play set that it really is not, I think it's more dangerous than it is helpful oftentimes. How do we use that space more effectively to really address the needs of our students with special needs? And so that was really kind of the focus that we went into the presentation with, is how can we redesign our playground to offer the opportunities for play that all of our students need, but also some of those sensory experiences that our students with special needs really require, because that open space for many of them is just so overwhelming and not useful. And for many of our students with especially autism, they just don't know what to do there. It's just too much. And so that was kind of the focus that we went into the presentation with.
Perfect, thank you. So this is where we are in the overall process. So the process diagram is up there again. So just to kind of reiterate, we're about halfway through-ish of the conceptual planning year. So by the end of December, there will be a physical document that we can all point to. We can say, this is the plan for the schoolyard redevelopment. That document will include a brief listing of curricular connections and understanding of how that connects with your curriculum, how you'll plan on using this new space, especially with outdoor classroom spaces and signage and other things. It will also include fundraising targets and a number of other things, but the fundraising targets will be really helpful once we get to the fundraising phase, which is a full year of activities. And I had mentioned that last year with the MPS grants and facilities departments, we were able to raise about $2.8 million. And so there's a significant fundraising component that comes to this. Each school puts on different fundraisers. There's opportunities that we can share as we get a little bit closer to that as well. We also try to support fundraising through the Green Schools Consortium of Milwaukee to the best that we can. But what we're really striving towards is creating this document by the end of this year so that we're all on the same page with what we're trying to drive towards for construction in the summer of 2022.
Justin, I wanted to mention that we did get notified that because of the situation this year with budgets and not being in school, we are being allowed to set aside money from this year's budget for this project. And so I will be working with our facilities people to kind of determine, based on what I still need to purchase to get the school running. But I do want to set aside a nice chunk for that, so that we can get a start on that fundraising piece.
Yeah, and that's awesome because with COVID, we don't know how things are going to pan out with fundraising and where attentions will be. So yeah, that's excellent. Getting a jump start on that, that's awesome. The conceptual planning process to date. So as a part of this, we collected a lot of site photos, drone photos. Reflow went to MPS archives. There's a whole room full of old maps and utility information, so we digested all of that. We also circulated a schoolyard use survey that was geared towards teachers and students and parents. And then we also have been asking a little bit more about some of the existing school activities so we can help build off of those strengths. And then we've been meeting on a monthly basis. And we had one of these sessions, which was a more intensive charrette design session. And so CDS, again, a graduate program from UW-Milwaukee, took those ideas, working with Reflow, and put them all into one plan. Last month, we got together as a small group and we provided comments on that first draft. And what we're about to share is the second draft. But I do want to emphasize that it is draft, and so there is opportunity to provide feedback today and in the coming weeks as well. But with that being said, before we jump into what the plan is, are there any questions out there that I can answer about process or how we got to where we are today? Cool. And if anything comes up while I'm explaining this next, that's fine. But what we've identified here are 5 different opportunities to provide feedback. Is there one out there? No, okay. Was 5 different opportunities. I'll explain this idea flip, and then there'll be Google Forms, which is very similar. Please don't look at all these and think you have to do all of them. We're just providing different options for whatever way that you feel most comfortable in. And this link here that we're about to share as well also includes all of the PDFs, so you can download what we're about to review individually as well. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to flip over to this idea flip. This is a tool that we're using to be able to review the conceptual plan, and I'll explain how to use the software after I walk through the plan here. So we'll just kind of zoom out a little bit. Here's Benjamin Franklin. The front entrance is over here. Here's Nash right there, and the back of the schoolyard is on this side. So I'll just start in the back. One of the components that was shared in one of our monthly Green Team meetings was the intent to be able to expand the parking lot. And so that's what this wedge indicates here, is an expanded parking lot. We're showing multiple half courts, basketball courts. There is all of the stormwater runs down to this blue dot, this one stormwater inlet. So this entire asphalt area that's currently asphalt all drains down to that one location. And so from a stormwater management perspective, it makes a lot of sense to be able to focus a lot of our stormwater infrastructure down here. And so we're showing a bioswale in the corner and potential connections to the street as well as an underground cistern if that pans out. And then some native landscaping around that area that will provide that sensory experience for students. And what we're showing are these kind of stumps. So that's a different tactile experience to kind of jump from stump to stump around these areas. And then this pathway that loops around that would be different textures as well. What's being shown is the crushed red granite through the grass area. And then here's a mound in the middle. So that's that idea that we can have different terrains as well, which is kind of a fun sensory activity as well. We're showing here this darker green area includes trees as well as more green infrastructure in the case of a bioswale as well. And we're also showing this shape here is a gaga ball pit. There's another image that will further explain what that looks like, as well as Foursquare, hopscotch, and the regular pavement games. And then over in the corner, talking about putting kickball and markings for a half soccer field as well. We've also talked about putting some fence coverings, some kind of vinyl coverings that other schools have done successfully around portions of the chain link fencing, and especially around that utility box. Some fence screening is what that language is there. And then potential expansion of the existing tot lot would be of interest. Then as we move to the front of the school, the raised beds that you have going on, we'd like to help support expanding that potentially, and then including a pathway that goes around the front of the school, including some new ornamental fencing that would help secure that, that activity going around the school. And potentially an outdoor classroom with another one of those hill features in the kind of southwest corner of the school. This feature right in the very front would be more like picnic tables and areas where students can have kind of breakout small group sessions. Maybe there's lavender or other types of plantings that act as calming space as well. And just to provide just a little bit more perspective on this, CDS has created these renderings that help show what they look like. I'm just going to go ahead and mute. Yeah. So here's a good example. CDS created this that shows this walking path all the way around, some additional benches. Here's an image from a drone that helps to explain what we're looking at. Okay, and then here as we go over the underneath space, which I haven't quite mentioned yet, this which I think we're all familiar with, that it's kind of a really cool opportunity for music potentially and more sensory exploration. So what we've been talking about is having under each one of those columns, having a different experience that could be explored by students, potentially having an outdoor classroom in one of these spaces as well. The thought too was that if there was a wall that was painted white, that could double as a canvas for community events if we wanted to project onto that surface. This area below here is really unique, and that offers a lot of different opportunities. This pathway here is connecting with the pathway. Sorry, I'm zooming out. But the intent is to connect that pathway with the pathway that's in the schoolyard as well. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain a little bit more about the program we're using here. So these are the drawings, and we're going to ask you guys to provide feedback on this. We've set this up so if you have any questions, you can pose those questions here. I can appreciate this is the digital format. Normally we would do this meeting in person. We would do it in the gym. There would be multiple poster boards. We'd have a lot of in-person conversations. Due to COVID, we have to go this route. So with that being said, we're still going to try to make use of the sticky note type idea. So once I invite you guys to this, what you can do is you can click in the top right. There's a little stationary button, and then you can just drag and drop these Post-it notes. And then you just double click on these Post-it notes, and you can, in the question area, you can ask, let's say, how many benches are there? How many benches are there? And then what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to respond to that in the coming month or so. So this box up here is intended for questions. If you have things that you really like, it's really helpful for us to hear that. So if you really like the outdoor classroom, under the building, that's great to hear, so that we can help to, if you have any thoughts or questions about that, we can work on expanding a little bit more detail on that if that's of interest. If you see a comment that someone else put and you agree with it, or you're not, maybe you don't agree with it, You can go ahead and explore some of these other stationary tools that are in here. Further down the line are these kind of thumbs up and thumbs down. If you agree with the statement that someone else put in there, please feel free to use some of these tools. And then the improvements box. So if you have ideas for how we can improve this draft plan, conceptual plan, please feel free to drop notes in there as well. And then for our purposes today, the color of the notes will not mean anything. It's just how creative you want to get with some of the other features that are in this stationary tool. So with that being said, are there any questions? While I'll just take a minute to copy and paste the invite so everyone has access to this document.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
The walk paths, what material are we using? The benches, the benches and the expansion of the garden boxes. I mean, are we using a composite? Are we using something that's going to be durable and last for time? Or?
Yep, so that's a good question. So the pathway, so this pathway through that kind of grass area, that will be crushed red granite. That is ADA accessible, wheelchair accessible, and we can also specify to make sure that the granite is small enough that it's, what we've observed with other projects is that, especially with little ones, that if the rocks aren't small enough that they can pick them up and throw them. And so that's something we want to prevent from the beginning, and that would help in the long run as well for maintenance. In regards to some of the other features, the musical instruments, if you've been down to Summerfest in the past year or so, you'll see that Summerfest has a bunch of really nice musical instruments, but some of them, especially the drum, is damaged. And so we'll have to be sensitive to making sure that we purchase really resilient instruments. If we do decide to go the route of getting a drum that, maybe it's more of one of those steel drums so that it doesn't, puncture that drum surface. But we appreciate the need to have resilient features as a part of this.
Okay.
And then I also mentioned MPS facilities and maintenance has a number of rules about how to make sure that the materials selected are resilient. So we wouldn't want to put wood features too close to the building because there have been arson issues at school projects as well. And so, if we're talking about a wooden bench, that the wooden bench is far enough away from the building that it doesn't present a potential liability.
Okay. Now also with the overhang of the building, you were saying a potential outdoor classroom out there. Does that include additional lighting, or is there additional lighting necessary? Or yes, exactly.
Yeah. So that's a good point. We can talk about that. It would be helpful to understand. So I've been out there at dusk, and I took some photos of it at nighttime, or dusk, I should say. So there are some lighting, some lights that are underneath there, but the idea was that the majority of the activities would happen during the day. I'm curious, do you think you would need more lighting if you used it as an outdoor classroom during the day?
Well, I guess the question was basically because of closer to the door area, the sunlight doesn't hit directly up under there too well.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I think that would be awesome to have additional lighting up under there.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm writing that one down. So I'm seeing some people join in here. That's great. I'm also gonna, just to kind of show an example here, I'm just gonna drag and drop and put additional lighting under the outdoor classroom. That's great. And if you want to add more to that, go for it. I'll just mention in the details of each of these comments, we can see who created them. So if there are pointed questions, we'd be more than happy to follow up individually as well.
Awesome.
So this is one way for people to review. While you guys are kind of logging in, checking this out, I'll just kind of review some of the other ways to provide feedback. So once you get this email that Lisa is going to send out immediately after this meeting, you'll have all these links as well. But there's a Google form. So if we were to click that, so if this is easier to respond to, you can provide your responses this way as well. You can download all of these images. So this is a good example. So if I click here, you'll be directed to a Google Drive where you can download each of these images. And you can take a little bit closer look if you'd like to do that. And then we are interested again, what you like about the plan, trying to understand how interested you are in certain components. That's really helpful as we move forward into the detailed design process as well. And then what do you think should change? And then this is an important one too. Are there other community members or other stakeholders that we should make sure to engage in this planning process as we move forward? I know that, as Sarah had mentioned, there's been outreach to some elected officials, any surrounding neighbors that make use of the space. It would be really great to send them the survey, this presentation. Like I say, we're recording all of this. And so by all means, please do share this with anyone that you think would appreciate and provide some perspective on this. And if you have ideas, we're more than happy to reach out to anyone that you have ideas about that as well. And then I will say this last comment down here is important too. This is about why are you enthusiastic about the schoolyard redevelopment? As we move through the fall semester and wrapping up the conceptual plan document, we'll be collecting quotes that help to communicate the support for the project. And this can be a beginning part to being able to start collecting those quotes that help support those that conceptual plan document. And if there are any questions, I should mention here is the plan is also to have an in-person meeting in fall. We appreciate that digital meetings are challenging and not everyone has access to the internet. And so we are really hoping that we can organize a meeting in fall where we can review a lot of this information as well. And then if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out to Lisa Neeb. And we are looking to try to get as much feedback as we can in the next 2 weeks, so by June 5th, so that we can take that feedback, respond to it next month, and then be able to make updates to these plan documents over summer. So you have a nice draft for when you get back into the fall session. Okay. So I'll just kind of zoom in just so we can take another look at this one more time.
So Justin, there's been a little discussion in the chat just about small items on the playground. Just some of the students may want to pick those things up and put them in their mouth. So I don't know if we want to talk about possible ground coverings that you think would be safe for students, or if the red granite or the wood chips is a particular concern.
Yeah, so there would be the red granite. What MPS specifies for these types of projects is a red granite that, like I mentioned, was a smaller, much smaller. Think it almost, it's almost more like a sandy surface, but it has this, they call it a stabilizer, which helps to firm it up. And so it gets compacted over time with people walking over the top of it. But it acts more like a sand if it's put down in the way that it's spec'd out for. We really do want to stay away from rocks that are large enough to throw or would be attractive to pick up and swallow or be an issue like that.
Justin, can you just discuss the cost implication of foam? Somebody was asking if we could do the foam like we do under the tot lots instead of the crushed granite.
Yeah. That's a good one. So, so the rubber surfacing is expensive. So that's one option. And what we are talking about is including potential rubber surfacing for the existing tot lot or the expanded tot lot. It is expensive. It comes at a fairly high cost. It does, for fall protection around these features, you need something like that, or the wood chips. Wood chips are not handicapped accessible or ADA accessible. But the rubber surfacing comes in a couple different ways. So one way to reduce the cost for that is to lay down the rubber matting on top of the asphalt. That has a lower cost to it, but in the long run, the maintenance becomes a little bit more troublesome because the water, if this is the asphalt and here's your rubber mat, water will tend to get underneath there and then especially cause damage around the outside perimeter of that rubber matting. So while it is cheaper in the maintenance, it does cost a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, with that question being asked, my concern would be the wood chips, because the wood chips are flammable, and I only know because I've seen a tot lot burn.
Yeah.
So not only is it possible to do the rubbering around the tot lot, but I mean, realistically, or how feasible is it to do it on the walk path itself instead of the granite or the rocks? Or is that something that MPS is saying that no, we're not doing this because of?
Yeah. What if we went with the gold standard for the rubber surfacing? What that would actually mean is removing the asphalt, probably putting a concrete curbing or perimeter around it, and then it's like a poured rubber that goes in there, and so it wouldn't be cost effective to put in that poured rubber here. What you'll see at some of the high school tracks is they'll have asphalt, and then they have a different type of rubber surfacing that they put over the top of the asphalt track. There's cost to that. This, if there is interest in that, we could look at it. This, I think what we're talking about is rubber surfacing under the tot lot. For this walking path, this would be the crushed red granite, and that makes the most sense from a feasible, cost perspective. And again, it would be this much smaller gravel, sandy surface.
Well, my reason for asking is because for the gravel on the walk path, is that something that has to be repoured, relayed every 2 or 3 years, or and then I guess the other question is the benches. Are we looking at a wood composite or a wood bench, or maybe even a steel with a plastic coating for the benches?
Yeah, so those are both good questions. So what we tried with cohort 1 schools are a couple different types of edging along the crushed red granite pathways. Edging tends to look nice for the first few years, but then in time, because of frost heaving, it doesn't look as nice in time. So there is some migration of that gravel surface that would go into the grass surface. If this is nice and compacted, the management of that would be more on the term of like 4 or 5 years, maybe some cleanup after that each year, but it wouldn't be like wood chips. Like wood chips, that's another counterexample where you may be replenishing those wood chips every year, depending on what kind of wood chips you get. And I think the only wood chips that we'd be really talking about may be some mulch around the bioswales, but the crushed red granite, that's going to be in there for some time, and what you're managing is more of some of the migration that comes off of the path into the green space. And then to go back to the question about the benches, you guys have some metal benches, if I recall correctly, those buddy benches. I think trying to match the aesthetic of those buddy benches, maybe getting additional metal benches may make sense, just so that it feels like it's all one holistic schoolyard. I think that's a good approach. On other school projects, we have built small benches, and we've been installing logs and stumps so that if there is an issue, that it would be fairly low cost. And we're purposely leaving it away from the school building so that it's not a flammable or a combustible material near the school building. But that is one approach, is being able to have a low cost wood feature so that if something happens, it's not a big deal. But in this case, I would be leaning more towards having metal benches unless we think something different.
Justin, can we get just a little feedback maybe from those online? If there is so much concern about having that crushed granite, again, it's very compact, it almost feels like sand like you described. How important is it to have a loop visible to the teachers and to the students? Because it could be where the blue hits the grass, it's just grass. I mean, if there's concern with having the granite there. So how important is it for either gym class or other activities to visibly see that that is a completed loop?
I'll jump in. I think that the crushed red granite is going to be just fine. I think if it is of a nature as Justin is describing, that it's pretty fine, it's well compacted. And that there are engaging things for the kids to do, that will be hopefully the least thing that they're going to be drawn to, is picking up things from that, those very fine grains to throw around or put in their mouths. I don't think that that's an issue. For me, I think that the having a completed loop is important. For some of our middle school students, I think they kind of do the walking, talking, and so to have an actual kind of track that they can do that on, I think is great. We can tie that into curriculum again. If we measure it, we know that, 4 times around is a quarter mile or whatever. That can be connected to FIAD and their physical fitness. So I'm not very concerned about the crushed red granite.
I'll also say, so the loop, if that were to go in as grass, the crushed red granite helps to maintain or helps to reduce maintenance in the long run. So it will hold up better than what the grass will. So if this is a pathway that is being routinely used, that crushed red granite will hold up and won't compact the same way as what the grass would. So there is a maintenance reason for having that as well. But I was just thinking here that we could provide the distance of the walking path. Maybe we can show distance markers on the pathway as well on the asphalt markings.
Rachel can address, but they had also asked for different markings. If you look at the perspectives, so there's different habitat.
Yeah, in one of the perspectives, I know that we mentioned that the loop looked a little bit kind of like Lake Michigan in a way. So I wanted to introduce maybe a few graphics of maybe some lily pads, some leaves, or like some kind of lake feature graphics, just a few of them. Like, we don't want them to get worn out, but kind of continuing that adding like a couple fish. Like, I know Milwaukee has a lot of the little fish on the ground, and including that into a graphic on that river that runs around the columns.
Okay. Any other questions out there before we kind of allow you guys to respond through some of these other means too?
Justin, can you highlight the climbing feature?
Oh, yeah, thank you for that. So one of the conversations that we've been having is having a short, kind of underscore short climbing features that would have to be accompanied by one of those rubber mattings as well for falling. But it's intended to be more like bouldering, I think is the right term. where students have an opportunity to have those handholds and footholds, not go high, but just more use this space as a bouldering space. So we may actually want to remove some of these graphics that show the kids going up too high, but this was kind of a fun tactile recreational feature that was underneath here as well. I'm gonna make that comment.
Justin, could you
Can you
also
also
speak to the
talk
Gaga
about
print?
use in winter? How, like, if any of those spaces can be shoveled or snow blowed, or what may not be available during the winter months?
Yes. With students.
If I may say something, I think part of that falls in on NPS. There's certain things that they don't allow us to do on the play structures, on the playgrounds. So if there is something that you guys have that's in place, that's laid out, that we could actually shovel a path through or whatever, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So MPS's policies regarding snow maintenance. Well, normally what I hear from other schools, this is a good question, is that they'll snow blow or shovel up to the site entrances. They won't necessarily do the schoolyard. That's the case here, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, and so in salting, there are guidance on salting too. I know that that's of interest. The stormwater management. So I do know, I think I saw some photos of where there's some ponding around some of the catch basins that you guys have on the school site. By putting in this green infrastructure, that will help to improve that situation. I was out there in January and I saw that there was a bunch of ice in the middle of the schoolyard. I got that sense because there was, probably snow that was out there that, hadn't been shoveled because that's not a part of the policy. And then students just walking on top of it, just crushed that down to, or compacted that down to ice. What this feature will do, what this schoolyard redevelopment will do, will help to focus some of the energies of the students in certain areas. You can use this space over winter. Obviously basketball and some of these other kind of gross motor activities will be impacted by that. This would be a conversation to have with the building engineer if it makes sense to plow this or shovel this pathway. I don't think all the schools are talking about doing that. There would be a reduction of use over winter, but there are different spaces that could be used if depending on very motivated teaching staff, if they want to take their staff out there to make that happen. I know Starm's Early Childhood Center, they're very strong advocates for going outside over winter. That brings a whole suite of other issues. You have to have the right mittens and hats and gloves and all the other stuff to make that happen. You guys are probably on top of that stuff already too, but there would be, yeah, absolutely right. With MPS facilities, there are rules about what gets plowed and what doesn't.
But I think you make a really good point, Justin. Theoretically, because of the grass and some of the other things, cold aside, one of the reasons the playground isn't accessible is often because of the icy conditions. And so we're hoping to mitigate some of that by creating this green space where we often get a lot of ice,
Yeah.
correct? Because that's the flow.
Yeah. I'll also mention, we're showing a lot of trees. So a couple notes on the trees. What we've learned with other schools is making sure that the trees that get installed have a higher caliper, which means they're a little bit more mature. So they're a little bit more resilient against students picking on them. And trees that are kind of more in high traffic zones, what we're learning is that it makes sense to put in temporary fencing or even permanent fencing around them that would be more decorative to further protect those trees. And then also there is an opportunity with trees on the schoolyard to be trees that are either natives or that blossom at a certain time of the year. So again, back to Starms, I'm thinking, they had a high interest in putting in sugar maples, because in 20, 30 years from now, they wanted to be able to tap that sugar maple on their school grounds. So that was kind of a really exciting part, but they also made sure to get trees that, blossomed now. And if we all were to walk outside right now, I'm sure we could all see different trees that are blossoming than other ones. And so because it's a schoolyard, it offers a new kind of unique opportunity for an educational experience with those schoolyard trees, as opposed to, just a standard street tree that may go in. Okay, cool. So I'm going to just page back to this. This is a good conversation. If there are any other thoughts, please do respond via IdeaFlip, the Google Form option. And again, we are recording this, and so once this gets processed, we'll post this. We have a page dedicated to Benjamin Franklin on Reflow's website. This graphic here will be replaced with the video of this webinar, and then you'll be able to see all the meeting minutes, as well as all of the other links that we're sharing all in one spot. And then Lisa is going to send an email. Lisa Neeb here is going to send an email to everyone that logged in today. So you have all these links, and you can get any future updates for that plan as well. But please do share this with others. We really want to get feedback again within the next couple weeks. If we need to make any accommodations on that, please let us know within this time period. But we are trying to get feedback soon so we can provide updates over summer. Okay. Sarah, anything else before we break?
No, I'm just, one of the staff members who was online chatted. It's just the amount of work and the potential is simply stunning. And I'm just so excited for this community to have this, not only our school community, but the neighboring community, to really buy into this improvement at Benjamin Franklin, because it is really going to be something for the entire community.
Very good. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. How do I get out?